Welcome to another week of Future of Money, sponsored by Libra. My name is Denitha Doe, and I am here with Daniel Winters of Global Tax Accountants out in New Jersey. He is well known in the Bitcoin space for understanding international issues related to tax, as well as helping plenty of individuals file here within the States their Bitcoin earnings. Thank you for joining me today, Daniel.
Thanks, Anita. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Yeah, so I'd love to catch up, tell everyone about Global Tax Accountants and what you do with your clients.
Sure. Global Tax Accountants is we're a boutique tax firm. We focus on international and Bitcoin tax services. So what that means is our clients could be overseas, they could be in China or a different country, and Americans still have to continue filing their taxes wherever they are in the world. That's the IRS rules. We've just recently launched into the Bitcoin space because so much of Bitcoin is really international, and besides, it's a revolution. so so it's time to join it.
Yes, it is. And it's a revolution that has some pretty interesting tax regulations and implications. Can we talk a little bit about that? Last year, for those that don't know, the IRS did issue a guidance back in March of 2014 as to how Bitcoin should be treated, Bitcoin or any digital currency should be treated when filing your taxes. Can you share a little bit about what that guidance was?
Sure. The IRS issued a notice last March, and the main thing that the notice said is Bitcoin is a type of property. So for most people, it will be, and companies, this is going to be treated as a capital asset. So the treatment is identical to selling a stock like IBM or Apple. It could potentially be inventory, but that's frankly pretty rare. For the average person and the average company that has Bitcoin activity, the IRS guidance says it's property, it's a capital asset, and you need to look at gain or losses on this, like buying or selling a stock.
Interesting. Which is my understanding. What makes it a little bit more difficult than a stock per se is this could be a coffee purchase here, or a regular $2, $3 purchase, and it's difficult to possibly track that those transactions.
That is true. That is true. Because and just to step back a bit, so when I say that Bitcoin, the IRS treats the sale or exchange of Bitcoin like a stock, what that means is, let's say it's Monday morning and I go to Coinbase and I purchase $100 worth of Bitcoin, and then 2 days later, I go on Overstock.com and I purchase something for the whole. I spend all the Bitcoin I have, except now my Bitcoin's only worth $90. So my Bitcoin's all gone. I spent $90. I have zero Bitcoin, and I'm going to get something from Overstock.com. Well, I just lost $10, and so I lost $10, and I got a widget on Overstock.com, and that's a capital loss, and this needs to get reported.
Interesting. That is a little tricky. Can we walk through then possibly the different aspects or the different types of situations where you would be filing Bitcoin taxes? For example, if you're a miner, what does that look like? Or if you're selling and trading, let's start with selling and trading. Um,
Sure, thanks. And which is probably that's one of the most frequent questions people ask me about is, how does this work? So again, going back to that example, let's say it's a happier situation. You buy $100 worth of Bitcoin, and then 2 months later, now it's worth 150,
mhm.
and you sell it all at the same time, okay? And you cash it out of your account, or you purchase some goods or services. So you now have the widget from Overstock, but you have that $100. I'm sorry, you started at 100, it went up to 150. You have a $50 gain. That you would report for tax purposes because you made $50. So you need to report this. The issue that you spoke of before is there is no minimum transaction. And this is because the rules work exactly the same for stocks. There have been numerous times in my career where I see a brokerage statement and I occasionally see, a 94-cent transaction, cash in lieu, like a fractional piece of a stock. It's the same exact concept. And what the IRS did is simply apply current rules to a new form of property, which is Bitcoin.
Interesting. So for those that are selling and trading, it is something that you have to be aware of if you have a gain or if you have a loss. Either activity result needs to be reported to the
Yes, it does.
IRS. Okay.
Yes, it does. And one thing I'd also like to mention is, look, let's face facts. Bitcoin's price really dropped last year from starting the year about 1,000 to at the end, it hit almost 200 and up to maybe 250 by the end of the year. Um, Plenty of people I spoke to lost money on their Bitcoin. But the good news is you can still take your losses. Um, the way gains and losses work is you put in all your losses, all your gains. The losses can wipe out gains, but you can still take $1,000. I'm sorry, you can take a $3,000 loss, even if you have no gains. So if you have a job and you made 100 grand, and you have a $3,000 Bitcoin loss, then that's only 97,000. So
Right.
the IRS does give you a break.
It does. And that's something to remember. I think in the accounting world, it's something like never let a good loss go wasted.
I agree. I agree, and the IRS agrees with you because if you're in the unhappy position of you've lost more than $3,000 on Bitcoin or whatever other stocks, you use up $3,000 a year forever. So those losses never expire.
Something to know. Thank you so much for that, Dan. Let's go on to minors. What's the
hmm
situation? What's the tax situation for those individuals?
Sure. The way mining income works is this, and it's a little different. Let's start in a simple situation where someone has like some Bitcoin miners at home in their spare bedroom or whatever.
Mhm.
Okay. The IRS says that the Bitcoins that you receive on any given day, your income is the US dollar value of those Bitcoins on that day. You take that day's rate, and that's going to be your income. So every day Bitcoin has a different rate. Every day you're going to mine a different number of Bitcoins, and you just take the number of coins times that day's rate. That's a simple situation where all you're doing is mining, and it's not a large business. For businesses, the Bitcoin isn't the you're generating your revenues essentially. If you're a mining company and you've got 100 computers that are churning out bitcoins,
Mhm.
these are your revenues. Then you reduce your revenues with your expenses. Um, Most of your expenses will probably be in normal dollars, but there are companies out there who pay for things with Bitcoin. And the IRS says, well, we don't know from Bitcoin. We want you to give us the dollar amount. So if you purchase something with Bitcoins, you convert it into dollars and then you book your expense.
Interesting. And just so everyone knows, although a lot of our listeners are accountants, if you are doing this yourself, this is something that you need to know as a minor,
Yep.
how to treat your earnings. So, what I hear from that is if you are a minor, every event is either is a revenue generating event that needs to be reported.
Yes, all the Bitcoins that are mined on a given day, those are your revenues.
Interesting. Cool.
Um,
And go ahead.
okay. Nope.
Okay. And then the next group, for someone that's working for a company, whether they're a contractor or a full time employee, if they're paid in Bitcoin or another form of digital currency, what is the situation for that individual?
Sure. And the situation you describe, where someone is either an employee, where they receive a W 2, or a contractor, where they get a 1099, the IRS addressed this very specifically in the notice that they issued last spring. And the situation is if you're a contractor and you receive Bitcoin, your income is the US dollar value of the Bitcoins on the day you receive them. That's what you get. So if you get $5,000 every month, at the end of the year, you add up that that it's the dollar amounts, and then your employer should issue you a 1099 just as if they're paying you in dollars. For employees who receive a W-2, it's the same situation. Same situation. Your income is the dollar value of the Bitcoins that you receive. Those dollar amounts are added up for the year. That will go on a W-2. Frankly, so far, I've talked to a number of folks who are doing contract stuff for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I've yet to see, I'm waiting to see my first Bitcoin wage employee, but it's more project stuff of the folks I talk to. Now, here's the thing. It's a two-step calculation because I do a project for someone and they send me some Bitcoin and my income is the dollar value. Okay. So I get, picking a number out of thin air, I get $1,000. So I have $1,000 of income. Ordinary income is probably subject to self-employment tax. However, now I have a capital asset with a $1,000 cost basis. And unless I've changed it out to fiat dollars that day, I'm going to spend it down, and there's going to be differences in every transaction going forward. The proverbial cup of coffee, what have you. I met someone not long ago. He paid his rent in Bitcoin. My hat off to him. Okay.
Nice. Hat
Yeah.
off to his landlord too. That's awesome.
I was shocked. I was shocked. Yeah, I was
I love
shocked.
that.
But so anyone in that spot, they have a two-step calculation. They have the ordinary income, and then as you spend down the Bitcoin, then you have transactions. I've also talked to people in frankly, an unhappy spot where they were paid like a couple big lumps of Bitcoin and they didn't cash it out to dollars, and then it lost value throughout the year, and now they got to pay tax on the money and now it's gone. So that's not like a great spot. But unfortunately it has occurred.
That is a bummer. And it's also something that I don't want anyone to gloss over too. So if you are paid, say, $1,000 on the first of every month, if you do not transfer it immediately into whatever fiat currency that you're using, you're likely going to have a gain or loss situation. So you have to do your self-employment tax on that $1,000 as well as whatever it
handles capital gains. And this is a good point to kind of launch into, what about businesses who accept Bitcoin?
Yes.
We see this a lot with online companies, and I mentioned Overstock.com, but it's just one example. Most merchants who accept Bitcoin are set up with a payment processor so that their client pays, they can invoice in Bitcoin, but that money just whistles right through, it gets converted, and they get the dollars the next day in their account. They don't have to handle any kind of exchange rate difference. There is no gain or loss on that transaction. I'm set up I've had clients pay me in Bitcoin, and that is what I did because I don't want to deal with the volatility either. And frankly, I had a transaction where my payment processor couldn't get it to work. So I just told my client, all right, look, just send me the Bitcoin. And they did. And wouldn't you know it, the price went down the next day.
Naturally.
And then, well, welcome to Bitcoin. I held on to it for a month and a half till it came back up where I wanted it to be, and then I sold it.
That's hilarious. And so in that case, you'll be reporting a gain.
I have yes. I and
just so if anyone's trying to follow.
Exactly correct.
Okay.
Exactly correct. The reality is I got interested in Bitcoin because I was playing around with it myself, and that's how I found out about it. But so that's an issue, with companies. But some companies, I have met the occasional company that operates purely in Bitcoin. It's a little complicated from accounting perspective, but it's certainly pretty interesting. There are also other cryptocurrencies out there. I've occasionally talked to folks who, Bitcoin's not the only thing there. There are other things going on, and the same rules apply. It's the same set of rules for what the IRS calls a virtual currency.
Thank you for that. And yes, I think someone may think that because they're paid in this form of currency as an employee that it's somehow handled differently, but just in case that isn't made clear, it is definitely handled the same way when it comes to reporting taxes as far as self-employment tax.
It is.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit because I know that you have a lot of experience and expertise in the international space.
Hmm.
What are some international issues that a person should be aware of?
Sure. Well, I guess the first thing to keep in mind is because, I mean, at its core, Bitcoin is an international system where you can, it's a trustless peer-to-peer system where you can transfer value around the world, quickly. A transaction time is just 10 minutes. Um, there are a lot of Bitcoin exchanges operating outside the United States. And people are putting money there and they're trading and they're doing other stuff. The first thing is, as U.S. citizens or green card holders, we need to report our worldwide income. So what that means is if you're trading on an Asian exchange or a European exchange, then you need to report that activity to the IRS. Those are the rules. I was asked at some point by someone, I was trading derivatives on Bitstamp and I lost money. What do I do? And the answer was report the losses. Um, and if you don't report them, you don't get your loss. So the number
Report.
one is whatever we do, we need to tell the IRS. Um, on the same train of thought there with international stuff, in order to buy significant Bitcoin outside the US, you're probably going to need to wire money to a foreign exchange. There's a rule out there that says there's a foreign bank account report. And this is a report that has to be
Hmm.
filed if you have at least $10,000 total in all foreign accounts. It's an open question. Is the Bitcoin or virtual currency in a foreign exchange, is it subject to the rules? That isn't sure. One thing is sure, though, the fiat currency, the dollars that you send, that falls onto the FBAR rules because that is the cash. So what that means
Hmm.
is if you wire $10,001 to an exchange, that goes into a foreign account. It might sit there for only a day, but then it gets turned into Bitcoin. You have a reporting requirement. That is quite clear. Um,
That's very interesting. So, walk me through, I guess, what would happen possibly if you just did not know that you transferring your money to a foreign exchange over $10,000. What could happen?
well, the first thing is that the penalties start at $10,000 per unreported account, so that can get expensive pretty quickly. I recently attended the cryptocurrency policy forum in New York City and had the opportunity to listen to the head of FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. They're in charge of this, and they're also the federal body that issues rulings about money transmission and does Bitcoin constitute money for that regulatory purpose. And she told the audience that we're getting some pretty good reports from some of the foreign exchanges. So,
Hmm.
frankly, at the top level of the U.S. government, they're quite interested in Bitcoin and what people are doing around the world. So, I would just recommend take a conservative approach, follow the forms.
That's a really, really good piece of advice and a great segue too. You were at this recent talk. Can we talk a little bit about the conferences that you've spoken at? And I think you also have one coming up in Texas at the end of this month. Can you share a little bit about what that conference is and
Sure.
who will be attending? Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, there's a Texas Bitcoin conference, which is occurring in Austin, Texas. I believe the dates are March 27 to 29. It's going to be 2 straight days of speakers and activities. I think there's going to be something like probably a 225 some odd people speaking. Um, and on the second day, on Sunday, Senator Stephen Stockman from the state of Texas, he's going to be there. He's a big Bitcoin supporter. There's also going to be a tax panel where I've been invited to speak, which is kind of nice. And I got so I kept hearing all these interesting questions of people about how do you treat certain Bitcoin activities. In particular, what if you have Bitcoin and then you take it and you buy something else, and then you take that second virtual currency and then you buy another one, and then you get back to dollars? Well, what are you supposed to do? And the answer is, So,
Great answer. Let's pause for a moment there.
yeah. So, I wrote an article about this, and I'm going to be able to present that at the Texas Bitcoin Conference, which I'm pretty excited about. So, if anyone's doing something like that, pop by the conference, or maybe go to globaltaxaccountants.com, and I can tell you all about it.
Sure, absolutely. And what's the name of the conference in Texas?
I believe it's just called the Texas Bitcoin Conference.
That's it. Okay, cool. And is it in Austin or
Yes,
Dallas?
it's in Austin, Texas.
Awesome, fabulous. So if anyone is in the Austin area or is thinking about wanting to go to the conference, look that up. At the end of this month, you'll be there speaking about taxes.
I
And
will.
I love that last question that you just said that someone had asked you. Can you tell us maybe, if you can think of one, the weirdest question you've ever had about Bitcoin and taxes?
I'm trying to. Wow, there's a few. One of them was I'm trading derivatives on a foreign exchange. How do I treat this? Someone said I have Bitcoin held at a company in Panama where it's a system that it has a stable value for Bitcoin. So it's Bitcoin, but it's like a stable dollar value, and it's in Panama. And how should I report this? And I said,
Hmm.
well, okay, if it's purely Bitcoin, then you don't actually have to report it for foreign bank account purposes. But if you have any income from this situation, you need to report the income. I also responded to the person, said, there's a company in the US called BitReserve that does the same thing. So, frankly, why don't you just take your money out of Panama and put it back in America, where at least you got some recourse if the company blows up?
And how did they take that piece of advice?
They were receptive. Yeah,
Awesome.
they were
Great.
they were receptive.
And just so I'm clear, the reason why they didn't have to do the foreign bank reporting is because it was not over $10,000 in that situation.
Well, well, if the difference is FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, has said at least for 2013, the virtual currency itself doesn't have to be reported. But it's clear that the the hard currency, the dollars, the fiat, definitely have to be reported. So if all that's in the foreign account is $20,000 that you've transferred Bitcoin without transferring dollars, then for 2013 there's no requirement. Now the question is, what about 2014? And when I
Mm-hmm.
attended the cryptocurrency policy conference, there was a Q&A, and I asked the head of FinCEN, what is the situation for 2014? And her answer was, I haven't figured that out yet. So it's an open question, but I recommend taking a conservative approach. If you're not sure, just report it. Frankly, you have nothing to lose it's a simple informational form, and if you report your income, you're doing the right thing. So when in doubt, take a conservative approach. That's what this accountant has to say.
I think that's amazing advice and a great point to end on. Take a conservative approach and possibly work with an accountant. What's the best way to contact you, Daniel, if someone is interested in working with you? And what types of clients do you serve?
Sure. The kind of clients I serve would be either individual traders, companies who are involved with Bitcoin. It couldn't just be someone who I've got returns on my desk of someone who was paid in Bitcoin. So that kind of thing. And I've got some interesting planning to do because they're going to receive a substantial amount of value in a different virtual currency. So if you're involved in Bitcoin, we can talk.
Awesome. And globaltaxaccountants.com is the best way to connect with you.
Yes, that is the easiest way to reach me.
Fabulous. Cool. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been just a wealth of information, and I know we're in the throes of tax season, so I really appreciate you taking the time to answer some burning questions that a lot of our listeners may be having.
Thank you very much.